Here, appreciate Chris. I want you guys to know something. So I take a group of what we call emerging leaders or next generation leaders at Blue Valley through a kind of a leadership development course throughout the year. So that's what I spend my time doing on Sunday nights. Campus pastors recommend these youngsters to me, and they have to have been through D groups and a whole lot of other stuff. And then what I do is I spend the year walking with them through books that help them build a toolkit for what will be required in the middle part of this century to be able to lead Blue Valley. And there's 6 books that we take them through, but one of them is Chris's book, Terms of Service. And I would, from my experience with our groups, that has been the book that has maybe been the most enjoyable in many respects. But Chris, to kind of get started before we dive into everybody else's questions here, first of all, I just feel like that maybe this chair is about to completely collapse. I am not going to
Stools
move.
are always questionable.
Yeah,
I'm always like,
yeah, I'm not going to move.
I have a lot of weight on this foot
yeah,
right now.
Yeah, well, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. I'm a little nervous. I'm super nervous. One of the things in terms of service that you do is you talk about it's not just social media. You call it the social internet.
Yeah.
And I've had people say to me before, you know what? I'm not on social media. I did exactly what you told me. You know. And don't realize that even though they may not be on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, they're still being impacted. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah. So I try to keep this out of my talks a lot of times because while I think social internet is a more accurate term for what we're all dealing with, social media is the more widely accepted and understood term. The reason I think the two are different, and I use social internet more than social media, even in the books, is this. To explain the difference. Social media, really this comes from Postman, even though he wasn't really talking about the internet because he died before social media was around and barely when the internet came around in the mid to late 90s. It's really the difference between media and technology. That's what the difference is here. So a good way to explain it would actually be to use the television. So when you consider TV, the news program you watch, the sporting event you watch, the sitcom you watch, that's media. The actual TV you have in your house is the technology, right? It's the ones and zeros, the electric wiring that delivers you media. Media is the culture created by a form of technology. It's the culture that's created using the technology. Football would not be the cultural thing that it is today if it weren't for the medium of the television. For the technology of the television. So the media is shaped by the technology. So when we talk about social media, specifically, like technically speaking, social media is the cat video, the picture of the family member, that article you read on that website. That is social media. The social internet, using our television analogy, the social internet is the ones and zeros, the algorithms, the recommendation engines that are sending you down the rabbit holes. It's all the technology, the notification bubbles. It's all the technology that amplifies the media. So the reason I am more concerned and talk about the social internet more than social media is, like I said, I think more in the students' talk than I did right now, or than I did in the first session. We get so caught up in the media. Oh, watch this, don't watch that. Read this, don't read that. And while we should be concerned about those things, I think a lot of our attention, frankly, should be more turned toward the social internet, the technology, the plumbing that kind of flows under all of the like why am I seeing these videos and these articles rather than focusing so much on the content. So that's why I talk so much about the social internet. And the social internet goes far beyond those apps you see on your home screens. It goes into what pops up in Google search results or on our favorite news platforms and things like that.
So that's what I'm getting at. So
yeah.
What you say in your terms of service book is that you can never have logged on to Facebook, but you are feeding the algorithms that feed you search results, that feed you the stories, the content that you want. That's populating your news.
That's right. And an example of that. So my grandmother is 88 years old. She lives back in Indiana. She's my only living grandparent and has been since I was 5. And so I call her every Sunday, have since I was a kid, and still today, call her every Sunday when I'm making dinner. And so couple of years ago, I think when I was writing terms, I called her one Sunday, just check in, how's your week, Grandma? We talk and all that. And my grandma has never used social media, ever. She's never used the internet. Technically she has, because recently we got her, and when my daughter was born in 2020, my parents got her an iPhone. It was the first non-flip phone she ever had. This was in 2020, okay? So she didn't have Wi-Fi at her house. She didn't have anything. She's had a flip phone until 2020. In 2020, my parents got her the most basic iPhone you could buy, and she doesn't know how to text. I tried to text her once, and she lost her. She called my dad, and it was like, I just got something. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I'm supposed to open it. So that's my grandma, all right? Has never used social media. The only internet she's ever used is we don't post pictures of our daughters on social media, which is a thing that you can imagine is important to me. No judgment if you do that, but anyway. But we do have a private iCloud iPhoto album that family can access to see pictures of our kids. And so she got access to that. So we used to mail her pictures, because she wasn't on social media. So anyway, she told me on the phone one day when we were talking, she said, I was talking to a friend of mine, a friend of hers who is her age but has Facebook. She was like, my friend told me, Rosie told me that she tried to post a picture of the American flag with the words of America the Beautiful in the caption the other day, and Facebook blocked her and said, no, you can't do that. That's against our rules to post a picture of the American flag and the words to America the Beautiful, or whatever it was. And I was like, really? And so I just as I'm on the phone making, our Sunday evening roast beef dinner or whatever, I'm Googling Facebook, America the Beautiful, fake news thing. And immediately a dozen results of this isn't real. People are posting it on Facebook being Facebook blocked me, but it's not. And I'm just all this to say is my grandmother, who has never logged on for Facebook for a second, was tricked, was duped by a fake piece of Facebook content, and she's never even used the platform. So I think all of this is to say, just illustratively, that you don't have to use social media to be duped by it, to be tricked by it, and to otherwise be affected by it.
To your grandmother having an issue, there were some hysterical videos last week of people online posting videos of them trying to talk their parents through subscribing to Peacock so they could see the Chiefs game.
I saw that.
That was some good comedy. Thank you, NFL. My husband has been on the phone with his parents for an hour trying to. It's really thing. So let's start hitting some of these questions.
Yep.
Bear in mind, I'm an editor. I can't read all this stuff, all right? So this is Derek saying, that's an interesting question, and it's no value judgment on you, okay? I still love every one of you, all right? But here's a question that I think might be relevant to some people. If there was one social media platform that you could completely get rid of today, what would it be and why?
Facebook.
Okay, why?
Because it's the biggest, and I think based on the stuff I shared before, has had the most wide-reaching, dramatic, negative effect on society as a whole. I think that's not even because, it's not even my least favorite, but just because I've seen its effects most broadly, that's why I would choose it. So that's why, that isn't to say that these other platforms aren't committing the same crimes. They're not crimes, but doing the same bad things. We just know Facebook is. Okay. And so I think its effects are most widely reaching. Do I think there are problems with other platforms? 100%. Am I concerned about TikTok's China ownership? Yeah, but I think this might rankle some of your feathers, but I think if you're more afraid of what China will do with your data than you are with what Facebook will do with your data, maybe you should go back and listen to the talk again. I don't know why we trust Mark Zuckerberg any more than the Chinese government, at least from what I've seen so far. I don't, because Mark Zuckerberg could deliver me a lot more, problematic content than it's not. I'm not afraid of Chinese soldiers coming and knocking on my door, I guess is what I mean to say. So I think,
where is your dog? I want to see your dog.
Right. So anyway, I would choose Facebook just because we have the most clear-cut evidence of them choosing profits over user
Yeah.
health than anything else.
All right. Well, let me move out of social media for just a little bit and go to something I think is on a lot of people's minds. How is AI going to impact, change social media use in the future?
Okay, so I'm not an AI expert, let me say. That's a very different, I do not consider myself a technology expert. I am a social media expert and kind of an internet expert, but beyond that, AI is a whole other thing. Now, I have been doing a lot of research into it. In fact, I'm kind of like leading a task force at work because we're wondering, how is AI going to affect publishing? How is it going to affect, you can imagine. We've had authors already submit manuscripts, a significant amount of it AI generated. That's obviously a problem. So we've been wrestling with this a lot, just kind of as an industry as well. How is it going to affect social media? That's a really good question. I think, especially going into an election year, this is something I've seen already. We should assume everything we see online is not true until we can prove that it is.
That was my presentation. Thank you very much. Yep. Thank you. We could have done that in 5 minutes. We could have napped. We'd have been great.
It's fake until proven real. The way you would be terrified if I could demonstrate to you how so easily things are, images especially, and videos a little bit harder. Images especially are manipulated. And especially going into such a heated year this year politically, you're going to see, especially once we get to like the general election, reports of candidate A or candidate B, or maybe for fortunate candidate C, saying, I say this, I believe this, and you might get audio that's faked. You might get, because here's how it could easily go down. 100% how I could see it go down. There's a debate between candidate A, candidate B, and the day after the debate, there's leaked audio from a hot mic from what one of the candidates said. And because it's hot mic leaked audio behind the stage, backstage at the debate, it's not very good quality. That's why it's not good quality. Not because it's faked, but it's not good quality because, it was, the mic was muffled and it was backstage at a debate. And they just are saying some like absolutely horrible thing that's just totally unacceptable or whatever by a broad majority of Americans. And then the people who don't like that person 100% assume that it is true, leaked hot mic audio from behind the stage at a debate. And the people who do like that person say, oh, this is faked. And whatever whatever narrative wins first will be all that matters. Because even if it's proved to be fake 12 hours later, you're not going to catch all the people who saw it when they thought it was real. And so I think we all, just as like wise Christian thinkers, as people who want to steward their minds well, especially going into this year, need to assume something, especially if it's like, wow, I can't believe they said it. Your next thought should be, maybe they didn't. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I was in the room for your thing while I was doing my thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
So anyway, that's what I would say. That's where I'm most concerned with AI is tricking us. Because some of the stuff I've seen so far, man, it's pretty good.
So. I mean, I showed a thing in here of Taylor Swift dissing the Bengals.
Yeah.
And if you weren't paying close attention, I mean, you would.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We're moving so quickly.
Yeah.
Something I write about, I think I read about it in Wolf, is part of the reason we're so easily duped into this stuff isn't because we're dumb, or it's often not even because it's confirming biases, though sometimes it is because of that. It's often because we're consuming content at such a high rate that we don't want to take the time to stop and confirm. I don't know if you guys remember, this was kind of in the news, so you might. It's not just for people who are online. There is an AI...
You're really making me feel smart right now.
Thanks, man.
I appreciate
That's what I'm here for.
Thank you.
You can have me out however often you want.
Thank you.
Yeah. There is this, about a year ago, maybe over a year ago, there's this AI-generated image of the Pope. Does anybody remember this? And he was in this huge white puffer coat.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, he looked like a dude who just recorded the sickest rap album in the coolest studio in New York City. But it was the Pope in this like giant white puffer coat. And it was like, I was tricked by it. I was like, wow, Pope's got some style. Like that's a cool, but like when you zoom in, like the hands look kind of weird, but like I just saw it in my feed. 100% thought it was real.
Yeah.
Obviously, that is very like harmless. Like, who cares if I think the Pope has style? Like, it's not like it's dramatically changing any effect on my life. But that's just a very like, I was just scrolling, saw it on Twitter, and was like, wow, that's kind of funny, and kept going. But it was totally fake. You know how many people saw that and still to this day probably don't know it's fake? A significant amount of people. So anyway, just be on guard for that this year, because that's going to be a case moving forward regardless, but especially going into a season where a lot of folks are going to be tilted, ready to explode about one thing or another.
So assume it's fake until it's proven true.
Yeah,
That's
and
a
now
good word.
until it's proven true is also kind of hairy in
Yeah.
itself, because proven true by whom? I think that's where it gets more into media literacy of like, you know, if an outlet likes candidate A and it's candidate A who
I did all this.
sorry, I'm really sorry to be going.
No,
across the-
I want to give you
for
a
anyone,
hug.
for anyone, for anyone who was at my talk instead of his, I'm giving you a summary.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Outlet A likes candidate A, but the stuff that was leaked from candidate A damages candidate A. If they come out and they're like, yeah, that's real, then they're probably telling the truth, because why would they lie to damage the person they like? So we should be consuming things widely just so we can try to get a better idea of the truth, not because we necessarily agree with everyone we're reading.
Well, we have students here, so I don't want to talk past them, but I do think that this is an interesting question. So even though it may be an adult in the room question, I think it might be important for the students to hear. Is the research between social media communications, you know, and texting and all that, and teens moving into the workplace and being able to communicate face-to-face, nonverbals, you know, taking nonverbal cues, voice changes and anything?
What's the question, sorry?
The question is there any research talking about any difficulties that are emerging for teens moving into the workplace and communicating face-to-face?
Got it. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen research in that regard. I've seen plenty of anecdotal stuff saying, you know, Gen Z employees who are maybe graduating college right now, going into the workplace, are having a harder time communicating. And I think I've seen some people attributing that to social media, and I think it's a fair attribution. We talked in my session about the difference between causation and correlation. Ice cream sales and murders go up at the same time, but it's not because ice cream sales lead to murder, it's because both things happen more in the summer. So like a lot of times there's correlation because of an unseen factor rather than causation, where X causes Y. I do think that young people, especially going into the workforce, are having a harder time communicating. I think some of that could be easily attributed to social media. I also think, especially now, that could be regression due to the coronavirus pandemic and isolation that happened at a really vulnerable time for those teens. I've heard of plenty of that as well for those young people. So I think it's probably a confluence of a few factors, but I think social media is certainly one of them. I just haven't seen a ton of data on it.
Okay. I would just offer, I do recognize, you know, porn is essentially, you know, sexual social media. And there's plenty of data out there that says if you primarily are engaging sexually, pornographically, that your capacity to be intimate in person is limited.
Yeah, sure.
So I mean,
That's right.
The correlation
Exactly.
is probably true.
Sure.
I would
Yeah,
imagine.
I think so too.
Yeah. This is more of a gender-specific question, so I'm going to de-genderize it, not in a bad way.
Are you erasing gender?
I'm erasing gender. See, that's how it can happen. That's a hot mic moment.
I heard he's erasing gender.
That's
Somebody
exactly
tweet it.
right. That's right. Tweet it. Tweet it. What? And you may have dealt with this in your breakout, but not all of us are there. What age would you suggest social media use?
Who was in my breakout? Did I not call getting this question? Maybe someone in there is the one who asked it. Because I said, you know, a lot of times when I'm speaking at these things, one of the most common questions is, what's the right age? I'm going to give you what's a really cop-out answer. There is no right age. Well, I'll tell you, there's a wrong age. Let's say it that way. Your kids should not be on social media before 13. And I say this not as a fuddy-duddy, but the platforms themselves literally say you need to be 13. So, like, if Facebook, Predator as we know it is saying your kids need to be 13, like, all right, well, if Facebook is saying they need to be 13, at least they need to be 13. Beyond that, I don't like putting an age on it because I like to be really gracious to parents on this. I said to the parents in our session, one of the challenges and opportunities that parents of teens today have is they're among the first generation of parents of teenagers with social media. That's incredibly difficult. Like, they can't go to their parents and ask, how did you do this with me? They can if their kid develops an alcohol problem. They can't do that with social media. And so I always want to be really gracious to parents of teens today who are like, man, I don't know the right answer. Because frankly, there's not one. And I think what should be established is, I think there should be proactive conversations about social media use before any social media use happens. Like I described in my session, a culture of grace should be established in the home where you go to your teen, you say, look, I know you're going to screw up on social media and you're going to sin on social media because you sin everywhere else, you little sinner. Because we all sin everywhere. Like this is what I said in my session. Teens are going to sin on social media because they sin other places. Why would we expect them to be like, and same with adults. It's not just teens, but we're talking about teens here. Like, why would we expect them to have perfect conduct on social media? They're going to come across content they shouldn't be viewing, but they do. They're going to backstab their friends through Instagram DMs, even though they shouldn't, but it's going to happen. And so I think having a proactive conversation with teens about like, look, all right, you're X age now, whatever, 15, 16, whatever you deem is appropriate. We're going to give you access to this platform or platforms, though I think starting with one is probably a good idea. And for X number of hours per day, I also think setting time limits is a good idea, both amounts of time and times of day. And set up those guardrails and say, look, let's just get this out of the way. I know you're going to mess up on this. What I want you to know is that I'm not going to love you any less when you do. So when you do, and if and when you do, please tell me, and we can talk about it, because I want to help you walk through this. I don't want to accuse you. I don't want to get you in trouble. I don't want to ground you. Now, there may be consequences for whatever you do, and we can cross that bridge when we get there. But I want you to know that I'm going to love you no matter what happens here, and that I just want to be able to walk through it with you. Please don't keep me out of it. I think those kinds of conversations, probably over the course of months or years, need to happen before we just like say, oh, well, yep, you're 14. Happy birthday. Here's Instagram. You know what I'm saying? Because it's so much easier to have proactive conversations than reactive conversations. I know, even though social media was barely around when I was a teenager, I was terrified to tell my parents what I was saying or doing on the internet because I knew my parents had a high standard of conduct for me and they loved me. Now, do I think today that my parents would have loved me if I told them, you know, the mean things I was saying about friends on AOL Instant Messenger or MySpace? Yeah, I do today think that they still would have loved me. But when I'm like 15 and 16 and doing those things, I'm just scared and I'm like, I don't know, will they? I just had a fight with mom yesterday. Maybe she'll use this against me, you know, like, I don't know. And so I think creating that culture of grace and welcoming hard conversations before you have to have them and explicitly saying all of those things can go a long way. Whether you have that stuff when they're 14 or 17, frankly, is going to be up to you and your kid. And I would say like the longer you can hold out, the easier it might be. I say that as someone who's worked in student ministry for 15 years, not as a parent of a teenager, because I'm not. But I think the longer you can hold out, I know a lot of folks who have waited till 16, you know, that kind of, I think the longer you can wait, the better. One last thing on this. It's going to be easier for you to wait longer to give a kid social media if your kid's friends are also having to wait longer. And this is where I've talked to a number of parents over the years who have gotten together with parents in their small group or on their kids' soccer teams who say like, hey, you started having a social media conversation yet? Yeah, man, what are you going to do? I don't know. Like, hey, can we all wait till they're 15? Like, try to form these little pacts. It's kind of funny, but I have heard so much success because here's the thing, and this is where like teens, if you're in the room and you hate me right now, I'm really sorry. This might win me back in your minds a little bit. Here's what a lot of parents, and this is the last thing I'll say about this, and we can move on to another question, but I think this is probably one of the biggest questions in the room. The admonishment I want to give to parents is this, because I think this is where parents can miss on this a lot, even as they're trying to be good parents here. What a lot of parents, because parents today didn't have social media when they were in high school or middle school, what a lot of parents today don't realize is the social cost of not having social media. There is a tremendous a tremendous social cost for your 14-year-old to not have an Instagram or your 16-year-old to not have a Snapchat. Now, if you want to wait to 17 or whatever to give your kids any of that stuff, parent, God bless you. And
You're pro-parent.
yeah, go for it. But I also want to be pro-teen a little bit. And I just want the parent to recognize that by not giving your kid social media until a little bit of a later age, which I think is smart, you're not getting rid of a problem or delaying a problem. You're just choosing a different set of problems in the present. Because here's what I'll say. If you're not going to give your 15-year-old access to Snapchat till he's 17, or your daughter access to Instagram till she's 16, I want you to be ready to cry with your 14-year-old daughter when she comes home because her friends are talking about inside jokes they had in their Snapchat DMs that that she can't be a part of, or that she's excluded from get-togethers with friends who are setting up things in an Instagram DM that she's not cool enough to be a part of. Those things happen. I've sat with a number of crying parents and kids in our youth ministry at church in the last 5 years or so who have had this exact thing. So all I want to say to parents is, by all means, delay social media use. I think it's good for your kid. Talk to your kid about the research if they care, and try to walk through some of that stuff. But please just recognize that there is a social cost to it for your kid. And this is why I advocate for parents banding together and delaying, because the more a teen's friends are delayed about having social media, the more you can lessen that social impact. And so I just want parents to count that cost and be ready to be a shoulder for your crying kid when they're left out of things socially because they don't have those platforms. And as long as you're ready for that, then wait as long as you want to give them access.
All right, good word. There's several different questions kind of feeding this, and so the first question is, what are signs that I have an issue?
Oh.
And then if I do have an issue, what do I do? And if my kid has an issue, what do I do?
Yeah. Okay. Signs you have an issue. This is, it can be kind of hard because I think it can be relative. I think if you have an iPhone, I'm pretty sure Android has this too, though I'm only an iPhone guy. Keep an eye on your screen time usage. Like I said before, the average American adult spends 2.5 hours a day. If you're like well above that, you might say like, okay, hey, I'm using social media well above the American average. And I would say 2.5 hours a day is a pretty good bit to begin with. So if you're looking at, if you get a screen time report from your iPhone and you have the courage to not just ignore it, mine is, I don't know if this is the case for everybody. Mine is always delivered in the middle of worship service on Sunday morning. Anyone else?
Right before I preach.
Yep. It's like,
The 9:30 service. Yeah.
the other God has come beckoning as I'm here worshiping the true one. So anyway, that's funny that this is the case for everybody. I wonder if that's intentional. Anyway. So like if you have the courage to look at that, like really look at it. I have before, and sometimes, depending on season of life, I've been ashamed or encouraged. And so I think, if you're recognizing, man, I'm using this a lot, I would say also, you're going to be able to tell if it's hindering your relationships. When I've had my most unhealthy relationship with social media, I'm like scrolling Twitter once I finish eating, but my family isn't finished eating, and I like have my phone at the dinner table and I'm scrolling my preferred social media platform, and my wife will be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I probably need to not do this and sit here and talk with my family." Like that's a good sign that like, hey, not like I have an addiction problem, I need to like, go to rehab, but like, hey, I need to set some guardrails here. So I think I think a lot of this is hard because it can feel so squishy, right? There's not like this tangible way to tell. I think also if you're finding, man, I feel validated by number of likes I'm getting, like that would certainly be another one. Engage, like if seeing those red bubbles, if you have notifications turned on, are like the best part of your day, or like, man, somebody liked my photo, and you're like, yes, like this makes me feel really good. Like that's not normal. It shouldn't be normal. It might be normal, but it shouldn't be normal. So I think if you're finding that a lot of your life is revolving around social media rather than social media as one of the things that revolves around everything else, like if it's at the center of the wheel, and there's not concrete ways to tell, but I think you can kind of feel that out in your own life. That's a way to do it. And then was the second question, what do I do?
Yeah, so what do I do? And then if I see that this is a problem with my child, what do I do?
I think the answer is kind of the same for both. If you recognize you may have like a social media problem, if we're talking like how much you're using it, etc., I think getting like an accountability partner is huge. And yes, of course, that could be like, I need an accountability partner to help me make sure I'm not going to X website or this website or whatever. Yeah, sure. But also like a really practical way that I've done this is setting, okay, I'm allowed to use social media for an hour a day. And you can go to the Apple Screen Time app and set it up so you can only use social media or any other category of app for a certain amount of time. And you can also make it so you can't use it before or after certain times. So what I have set up is I'm not allowed to use social media for more than an hour a day, and I can't use it before 7 a.m. or after 9 p.m. All right? So my phone locks down all social media apps after an hour or before and after those times. Because before 7 o'clock in the morning, there's no reason I need to be on Twitter. After 9 o'clock at night, I should probably be winding down anyway. Maybe I give myself allowance on the weekends or whatever, but that's a good guardrails. Now here's the key, and this is where I have not been good before and have had to implement stronger things. There's a screen time passcode that is different from your iPhone passcode that you set up. If you're sneaky, like me, you just keep the screen time passcode. And you just say like, oh, I've used social media for an hour, but man, I want to watch this TikTok for a few more minutes, and you get the thing like, your screen time is up, and you're like, I'll just override this real quick. Yeah, people are laughing. You've been there, and you know, I've been there too. If you really feel like you have a problem and you really want to work on this, you give that to someone else, preferably someone outside your house, like even beyond your spouse. And you don't even give it to them. They set up the password for you, so you don't know what the password is. And if you find yourself scrolling Instagram and your time limit comes up, or it's 9:05 or whatever, and it's like, hey, no more Instagram. Now you have to crawl over to your accountability partner friend from church and say, hey, can I get that screen time password, man? And they're like, what do you need it for? Like, man, I just like the 15 more minutes is all I
just need a little hit.
Right, I just need a little, please, just like a little bit more.
That's right.
Doctor
says coming, but you got to pay in cash.
Yeah, exactly. And so like that, that's a huge, like really, I just love that Apple and I'm sure Android have set up these guardrails because they're huge. They're really helpful and impactful. And so I think that's one of the most practical things. I think turning off notifications, using social media on your own terms, and like.
So that'd be true. That'd be true. Something not just for yourself, but you could do that kind of help for your kids.
Oh,
I mean, you've
of
got
course.
that. Yeah, just say, hey, I'm gonna.
And the other thing that we need to be aware of is like, this is where your teens are going to be way smarter about this than you, parent. Is your teens are trading hacks on how to get around these things. All right. So like if you have Covenant Eyes set up for your 14-year-old boy and you're like, I don't see him viewing any porn on Covenant Eyes, he's good. I'm like, you're a fool. Like there are so many ways to get around so many of these tools that this is where like teens are just so much smarter than parents are. And so they're trading these hacks like baseball cards at the lunch table. Like they really are smarter. So you got to like figure out, and this is something that I've done as well, like deleting something. Another step you can take is like deleting the apps off your phone. So like I have not had the Facebook or Instagram app on my phone for 5 or 6 years. What this does is not only does it keep them from harvesting my data a little bit more, but it also reduces the amount of time I want to spend on the platforms. Because like using Facebook in my web browser on my phone is way less of a good experience than if I'm using it in the app. Mm-hmm. And so you can put up these sort of soft hurdles to like make it so you want to use the platforms less. Which is, you can delete these apps and still use them. Same thing, like if you want to set up a guardrail for your kid and you say no social media, they may still be able to access it through some sort of backdoor ways. And so you want to just do some research and figure out how you can set yourself and anyone else you love up for success in that regard.
All right, let's shift to something that may be a little more controversial. And yeah, everybody says. And I don't know what these things are, so I'm partly asking, so what does this mean? What are thoughts on alternative media, such as Rumble, Telegram, et cetera, in the face of censorship and freedom of speech?
That's a good question. So I've looked into some of these platforms. I've created an account on most of these platforms as a means of research and such. I don't have a ton of strong thoughts. I think their user experiences are, by and large, awful. And
what do you mean by that?
Like the
just it's an ugly app.
Yeah, and like it crashes, or like I've just had a bad, like when I've tested it to be like, hey, what's out here? What's on here? I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can see like there's this smoothness of using them and all of that is just not great. That's part of what makes me wonder like how long a lot of these things are going to be around. I think if you feel like your content that you like is being censored from other platforms and you want to find it on those platforms, like I'm not here to judge, who's viewing. A lot of times it's more, right-wing conservative folks who feel like YouTube is censoring their stuff, so they head over to Rumble or whatever else. I'm not here, like I'm not of the persuasion to debate censorship policies of various online platforms, because a lot of times what I think is the answer wouldn't necessarily be the right answer for a major platform. Take, for example, like YouTube. I like YouTube. I watch YouTube every day. It is my TV. But I generally like to view content that is not going to violate YouTube's terms and conditions, and like what they allow on their platform, because I don't want to watch gore or sexual content or content that is like, otherwise broadly objectionable. If you find that you want to watch content that YouTube deems objectionable, whether or not you think they should, I think you should be free to go find that where you want to find it. But what I have found is my particular content tastes generally align with what's acceptable on these platforms, so I don't find much of a reason to go to these other places. Like when the war in Ukraine broke out, I opened an account on Telegram and was following a lot of threads on Telegram because a lot of folks on the ground were reporting through Telegram, like soldiers actually. And I was really interested in what was going on over there, so I wanted to see firsthand what was going on. I also saw a dozen things I never want to see again and never want to think about again, but it's going to be hard for me to, because I saw some stuff that social media platforms really shouldn't allow on their platforms, just like that could so desensitize us to violence and war and gore and all of that kind of stuff, that like, do I think Twitter should allow that? No. Like I think censorship is really good to some degree. Like there's a lot of stuff that people are posting on some of these alternative platforms that should not be available for my aunt on Facebook. Like she shouldn't just come across that on a Saturday morning when she's looking for Snoopy memes or whatever. You know what I mean? She shouldn't be like, ooh, funny Snoopy meme. Oh, dismembered body from Ukraine. Like that just shouldn't be a thing. So censorship, we all want censorship to some degree. What we don't want is mostly political censorship of a particular ideology we care about, etc., especially religious censorship, though I haven't seen much in the way of religious censorship. I've run Facebook, I have historically run Facebook ads for Christian companies and not had a problem. What I haven't done is violated their terms and conditions. And so I think generally I'm in favor of platforms censoring 80% of the content they censor for the sake of their users that should not see so much of what people want to post. However, for that 20%-ish or whatever that you may say, hey, we should be able to see this or that, I think you should be free to go find that wherever you want. I just...
provided it honors the Lord.
Exactly, yeah. Right, yeah. If you think it's of a political persuasion that YouTube or Facebook or whatever is against, and you want to go find it elsewhere, I think that's fine. I just... what I don't like to do, I've seen how a lot of these content moderation things work. You can imagine the content moderation, where I have some sympathy for Facebook, the content moderation that they have to go through, the stuff that human eyes have to delete from Facebook 24 hours a day, every day, because they can't just trust like AI to do it. Like actual humans in various call center like office buildings around the country spend 12-hour shifts every day viewing the worst kind of content humanly imaginable and manually delete it from Facebook before you and I can accidentally come across it. Pets being killed, people being killed, mass shootings that are Facebook lived. They're doing this stuff manually. What I've been really careful about in the whole censorship discussion is knowing what I know about that and then coming down and, like, I'm not going to slam them for, removing a political candidate because according to their terms and conditions, they violated the rules. Because I just know what they're dealing with on a broader scale, and I just have a little bit of sympathy for that. So anyway, all that's a roundabout way of saying I think those platforms are fine, and if that's the only place you can find the content you want to find, provided it's not sinful, by all means. But I don't think these are private companies freedom of speech does not exist on them in that sense. They're allowed to do whatever they want. If you think that a private Christian school should be allowed to have the rules that they have for their education, a private company, like a media company like Facebook or Instagram, is allowed to set whatever content guidelines they want because they're a private company. They're not a government utility that we all have a right to. And so I think when we recognize, if we want our private companies to be able to operate the way we want our private companies that we like to operate, these private companies have the right to operate the way they want to operate.
All right. Speaking of private companies, this I think is a question that some people might benefit from. If I can, I thought I had it pulled up. Things move around. Is the question? I own a small business, and we've used. I don't. And we use social media to market and brand. How do I ethically create posts and content without feeding into causing a negative impact on my followers or play into the product mindset? Also, being in charge of social media for a large brand, what advice would you give to business users?
Yeah. So a little consulting sesh here, both ethically and strategically. You can imagine, I spent a significant portion of my career spending thousands of dollars a month on social media platforms as a customer to promote Christian content to people around the world. So you can imagine I've wrestled with this a bit myself. And I think this is where, again, I'm not 100% anti-social media. If I was, I'd be violating my conscience by doing that sort of thing. What I see is a very broken tool that can be used to manipulate people in very awful ways, that I'm using this broken tool to try to shine the light of the gospel as far and wide as I can. So that's how I've reconciled it in my sort of like, as I've promoted Christian publications or content over the years, is I can use a broken tool to try to do some good work. For you, running a small business, whatever you're doing, I think if you think that your small business and whatever tool or service that you're providing is overall contributing to human good, whether you're selling shovels or providing accountant services or a tutoring service for kids struggling with math, whatever it is, whatever your small business is, as long as you are your conscience is not violated by what it is you're doing, and you think, hey, what I'm selling or the service I'm providing is helping people flourish in their lives or walks with the Lord, I don't think it's wrong to use a broken tool to promote your particular service or product that helps people flourish. I think that can be really good. And I think where I would start to ask questions about the ethics is like, are you using your social media ad budget to draw people into something that is destructive or self-destructive or whatever? I think that a lot of it's wrapped up in the content and the methodology where you go about using that. Or are you predatory somehow? I would say there are ethical questions around like running an ad that strikes fear into people or feeds into that divisiveness. I think there should be some questions around that. Like, we probably shouldn't stoke divisiveness through our small business on Facebook, even though it would probably be more effective. I think that's, we shouldn't feed into that. So I don't think the entire enterprise of running Facebook ads or running social media ads is 100% bad. I think it's a matter of the kinds of content you're creating and how to promote flourishing as best you can through what is fundamentally a broken system. Secondly, as a small business strategy.
Yeah.
Well, this is it's hard for me to know, and if you want to pull me aside afterward, I can give you advice. I can give you some free consulting on that. What I've always told people is you gotta have a social media presence where your customers are. Don't try to do everything everywhere. You'll fail and you'll waste 80% of your time and money. If your audience is primarily Instagram users, throw everything there and maybe a little bit someplace else. If they're primarily Facebook, throw it there and a little bit someplace else. Go where your people are, create content they find interesting, but that again is not going to somehow undermine who they are or otherwise stoke divisiveness or things like that. Just be honorable in your social media use as a small business. Remember the image of God in people. Don't see them as business to be farmed, but people to be served. And so I think I don't know who you are or what your business is, but I think a lot of the principles you would have if they showed up in your shop or your office, just carry those over to how you conduct yourself on social media. I think the Lord will see that and honor it. And I think, frankly, can be one of the best social media strategies you have as a small business. And I've seen a lot of success with that in my history of when we, short story, when we closed all of our Christian bookstores. Lifeway had 172 bookstores across the country. In 2017, at the end of 2016, I heard rumbles that we're going to shut down many of them. Did y'all have one around here, probably? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you tweet at me?
I did, that's right.
I was running Lifeway's social media, and I was running the Twitter account and Facebook account. So I was overseeing all of them. But I was actually posting to the Twitter account, the Facebook account, and the Instagram. And I found out that we were going to close all 170 Christian bookstores 30 minutes before the world did. This is as close as I've ever been to getting fired, because I immediately marched into my boss's office and just about flipped some tables over, because I was like, we're about to have the biggest PR crisis in the history of this company in 30 minutes, and I just found out. I think they just grossly underestimated how much people would care. So that day, it was, I believe, March 12th or 13th. I said, again, this is as close. I'm not like this all the time. I'm probably more like this than I should be. But I said to my boss, I said, okay, you're telling me this now. I'm going to tell you how this is going to go. Typically, Lifeway had a stance of if someone criticizes us on social media, we just don't say anything, which I had a problem with on a number of levels, but that's neither here nor there. We typically let people shout at us, be mad at us, and just ignore it. It'll go away. You agree with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Live life, man.
So when this happened, I said, here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to ignore this. People are going to be mad. They're going to be shouting at us on every social media platform. And I'm going to tell them, I'm going to reply to every single tweet, Facebook comment, Instagram DM I get with sympathy. And I'm going to say, hey, Diane, thanks for saying that. We understand that this is really hard. And frankly, it was really hard for us too, because backstory that you don't need, if Lifeway would have kept Christian stores open, Lifeway wouldn't exist today. Yeah. They were losing tens of millions of dollars a quarter, okay? Like they would be, you wouldn't have the Gospel Project anymore. You wouldn't have any Bible studies, books, anything. The CSB wouldn't exist. Like Lifeway would be gone. They needed to be closed. But it's not like I had friends who were leading this decision who wept for days, like nobody wanted to do this, but they knew that they had to keep the company alive. So I responded, I didn't keep track, but I think it was about 1,000 times over the course of 48 hours. I was at my computer for 36 hours. And I did not copy paste. I responded to every single tweet, Instagram DM, Facebook comment of people cussing us out, yelling at us, whatever, saying, hey, Diane, really sorry. Like, it was like, I met my husband when he was working at a Lifeway store. How could you do this? It means so much to me. I bought my daughter her first Bible. It's how she came to faith. I mean, it was like we killed someone's family member, truly. And so I was just coming alongside people and sharing in their grief with them. I said, this is not how it's going to happen, boss. Like, we're not going to just let people yell at us. We're going to come alongside them and tell them we're sad too. And it was like, that's fine, just don't yell at me anymore. I said, okay, cool. So that's what I did. And my wife was like, stop. This is one of the times when I was like definitely tweeting at the dinner table, like, you know, I was doing this for 36 hours straight. And but that's a long way of saying, as a small business owner, embody who you want to be on social media, not just when people walk through your door or ask for your services or whatever. Be kind, be gracious, and be Christ on social media. I think there are ways you can redeem and use it well.
All right. Did you ever say, hey, Diane, you kiss your mother with that mouth? I mean,
the number of times I wanted to say
oh
that.
my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I'd have lost it.
Yeah, I kind of did.
Yeah. This probably is the last one we're going to have time for to feed into it. Neil Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, kind of talks about, as I remember, celebrity for the sake, I'm famous for being famous. Yeah, that kind of stuff without really anything feeding it. And that, have you all read Amusing Yourself to Death? Nerds, only nerds. It's a really good book.
Yeah.
But it came out when I was actually in broadcast school. So
yeah.
But the whole idea of that we're just kind of being drug along.
Yeah.
So we now have influencers that have kind of come out of that culture and gone crazy. How does an influencer make money?
By turning attention into dollars. So it's the same way a sitcom makes money, or not the same way, but a similar way that anything on TV makes money. A TV program that has a high viewership can charge more for its ads. That's why, like I said earlier, the Super Bowl is, it's $8 million for 30 seconds or whatever, because there's 200 million people watching it. But that rerun of that soap opera from 1995 that's on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday is not charging anywhere near that amount because fewer people are watching it. An influencer makes money in a handful of ways. One, they can get paid by the platform they're an influencer on. This is especially the case like on YouTube with YouTube ad revenue. YouTube historically pays the best. So a YouTuber like a Mr. Beast is going to make way more money than somebody who even has, if somebody had the same number of followers, which no one does. If someone had the same number of followers on Instagram, an Instagram influencer with Mr. Beast's number of followers on Instagram is going to probably make a 30th of what he's going to make in YouTube ad revenue, because Google, who owns YouTube, Google has perfected how to pay its creators on YouTube, whereas other platforms who have long just relied on farming Instagram influencers or influencers' content to then sell ads on it themselves have never really cut influencers in on that money. So an Instagram influencer who posts a reel on Instagram these days might make a little bit of money because they've turned on some revenue for creators, but they're going to make very, very little compared to like a YouTuber. TikTok, kind of similar, though I think they even pay better than like Instagram, Facebook these days. So some influencers, depending on their platform, will make money from their platform. If Mr. Beast posts a video with 100 million views, he's probably making more than a few $1 million on that, on one video. And so that's one way. Another way is obviously through like brand deals. And this is the easiest way for an influencer to make money. An Instagram influencer who has 50,000 followers on Instagram, which might sound like a lot, but really isn't. They could go, there are different platforms to do this where they can like kind of put themselves on the platform and like say, hey, my services are available, I'll promote anything you want. And then brands can come and like send them free stuff or whatever. Or a brand will just find, like there's this 27-year-old gal who's a fitness influencer and she wears all this fitness gear and talks about her favorite protein drinks or whatever. That protein drink manufacturer may DM her on Instagram and say, hey, can we send you free stuff, and once you drink it on a video, we'll pay you $3,000? And she'll say, yeah. And so then she'll do it, she'll get the free stuff, she'll drink it, recommend it, hopefully say hashtag ad at the end, and then they'll deposit the money in her account. And then maybe they'll set up an affiliate program. This is another way where like, hey, use my code Katie when you go buy this protein drink and get 10% off your order. And then what that really is you're getting 10% off your order, and then Katie's also probably getting 10% of your purchase. So that's like affiliate work. So those are like brand deals. You would be shocked, maybe not, but probably shocked to know like if you have 100,000 followers on Instagram, you could ask for $2,500 for a single Instagram story, maybe $5,000 or $7,000 for an Instagram post. But because Instagram influencers are relying solely on kind of brand deals, they're not going to be making anywhere near the money as like a YouTuber who's relatively famous, because they're getting money from the platform itself. So money from the platform, brand deals, then you obviously have merch. Like if you're popular enough that you can make t-shirts or things like that, then you're selling merch with your face on it or your logo on it or whatever. That I like to follow influencers just to see like how they're doing this stuff. Merch can kind of be boom or bust. Like it kind of depends on the audience, depends on who it is, what their spending power is. Depends also how long they've been around. Like an influencer who just popped up with 1 million followers may not sell as much merch as somebody who has 1 million followers but has been around for 7 years, because they just have a longer tenured fan base. So merch and selling various things like that. And then a lot of influencers will do like live shows. We've seen a lot of influencers turn into musicians, God help us all. Or like some of them are like comedians. Or if they have like, I'm a big fan of the show called Good Mythical Morning, and they've been around for a really long time. They're like OG YouTubers. A couple of guys from North Carolina who took this morning show out to California. I watch them every morning when I'm eating breakfast and answering emails. They, this year, are taking their show on the road and doing the same Good Mythical Morning show, which is like a 20-minute show and it varies of what it's like. It's like what you'd see on Jimmy Fallon or whatever, but they're just two buddies who've been friends for a long time. They're taking that show on the road, and they're doing like a live show in 12 cities across the country. And I'm sure they'll make some pretty good money off of that and sell some merch and things like that. So influencers, the key to being an influencer and making money, here you go, kids, write it down, is to not be married to a singular platform, diversify your sources of income, and just keep creating tons and tons and tons of content.
And
That's
it's
how they make money.
pretty much still like being struck by lightning.
Yeah. What I would say is, it is easier to become an influencer than it is to become a pro athlete. Because pro athlete, you have to have,
You have to be born with something.
most of the time, I think. You got to have some physical innate ability. As an influencer, you could just be really funny, and you're not necessarily born with that, or you could become really smart, and like you could become a science YouTuber because you have a PhD in physics, but you also taught yourself how to make really interesting physics videos, like Mark Rober, a former NASA scientist who is one of the biggest YouTubers in the world right now. He creates one video a month and makes tens of millions of dollars, even though he only has one video a month. And but he's just he didn't set out to be an influencer. He was a NASA scientist and then helped develop the iPad at Apple and all this kind of stuff. But he was like, I like recording videos. I know how to. I'm going to teach kids science on YouTube by making these cool science videos. And so that's what he does. So it is in a sense struck by lightning in that it's probably not going to happen. But I do think there are more levers that are able to be pulled to become an influencer than there are for some other outlandish.
We actually, at Blue Valley, Greg and Kathy Moore, Kathy was our administrative assistant at Blue Valley for a long time. Greg's daughter, Chloe, started doing something called Chloe's Closet, and she, that's her job, and she's basically an industry.
Yeah, and that's what I think a lot of people, all of us get so caught up in the Mr. Beasts or these other massive people.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Right, yeah, who knows who that guy is.
Yeah.
But, you get caught up in all of these massive influencers. You get this idea that to become an influencer is basically impossible. Who's going to become Mr. Beast? Well, 1 million people are going to try, and none of them are. But you don't have to be. You can run a thrift store out of your closet to 20,000 Instagram followers and make more money than you probably could entry level in an accounting firm.
I mean, this Chloe, if I'm not mistaken, has an accounting degree from Truman State,
right? And
she is.
You learned some of that business acumen because that's what a lot of famous influencers don't know. Is they might be charismatic, but they don't know the first thing about how to run a business. If you can figure out how to run a business and learn some of those skills, and then by the way, I have this interest that's also an interest of other people, and you can set yourself up to scale effectively and things like that. I think a lot of times we kind of look down on, kids want to be influencers. Oh, isn't that sad? And I think if they see I need to be Mr. Beast or I'm going to be a failure, come on, that's probably not going to happen. But I think it's cool. This is what I like about influencer culture. I think it's really cool that you can just have an interest that you love more than you love doing accounting at some business in town. And you love that hobby or that interest, man, you really love doing wood carving. And you just happen to start a wood carving YouTube channel where you record time-lapse videos of you doing some really sick wood carving projects. Over time, you collect 200,000 YouTube subscribers who just love watching you do wood carving. And now you can make 20 grand a year, 40 grand a year, doing that for fun. I think that's really cool. And that's being an influencer. And so I don't think being an influencer has to be frivolous and petty and, oh, look at me, I'm so cool. I think being an influencer is really awesome in as much as people getting to do what they want for fun and, oh, by the way, they get to kind of make at least part of a living, if not a total living off of it. And I mean, in a sense, I'm an influencer being here. This all started when I started a newsletter that just happened to get a few thousand subscribers, and then I wrote a book. And then I wrote a book, which led to me getting to do this kind of stuff.
You did a podcast with Micah?
Yeah.
I have tens and tens of listens.
Right, exactly.
And,
I've sold,
that's right.
I've sold dozens and dozens of books, and and that's what allows me to get to do this. And I don't do this for a full-time job. don't make enough money to make it my full-time job. Like I still need all of my, but I'm kind of an influencer too, but I don't feel the need to be Mr. Beast or any of these other, massive.
Still don't know who that guy is.
Yeah, you might want to figure that out.
I don't know. I mean, do I look like a guy that needs to figure that out? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, listen, Chris, we have greatly appreciated you being here.
Thanks.
And we need to thank the drivers behind it. First of all, this wouldn't happen without Jonathan Locke and Micah Hayes dreaming it up, and so we greatly appreciate them. And then none of what they dream up would happen if it weren't for Missy Ausler, who was running a lot of stuff back there. And then all of the staff, everybody was involved doing stuff, and we're greatly appreciative. Who wants to come up and finish it? Because I don't know what to do. All right, where's Jonathan? Is he downstairs cleaning up? Hey, Jonathan, come down here and finish it.
All right, well, let's sit down again. No, I'm joking. Hopefully everybody had a wonderful day today and learned something and walked away with something. So that's the whole point of this. Chris, thank you so much for braving the roads in Nashville, making your way all the way here. And if there's any questions, follow up, come let Micah and I know. We'd love to hear those and hear thoughts as well. And then look forward to next year. We've already talked about next year's 5S conference. I'm not going to give any details yet because nothing's solidified, but it's going to be awesome once again. But Chris, once again, thank you. Let's pray, and then we'll dive out of here. Here we go. Father, thank you so much for today. Continue to shape our minds as you would to mimic Christ, and let us reflect that, Lord God. Help us to surrender our life to you daily for your glory and your glory alone. It's in Christ's awesome name that we pray. Amen. Amen. Chris, thank you once again.